Hello YouTube, and welcome to the Body Honesty Project. My name is Lydia, and today we are starting a brand new topic of conversation that is completely unrelated to fat acceptance. Now, don't worry, I'm still going to be doing weekly fat acceptance commentary uploads, but in addition to that, I would like to augment my library with a different topic of conversation. And that topic is CPTSD and narcissistic abuse. And the reason why I would like to start this new topic and new playlist of videos is because I recently found out that I have been living for 44 years with untreated brain trauma. Now, I was completely blown away with this discovery, but now that I know that that is what I've been suffering with my entire life, I would like to use the platform that I have to vent, to heal, and hopefully help others that might be silently suffering, don't know why, and don't know that there actually is help for this. So, where do I begin? Well, let's start off by talking about what is CPTSD. Now, most of you probably know what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a common thing that people that have experienced traumatic events go through, like going to war, witnessing a death, a big traumatic situation that leaves the person in a stressful state afterwards, and they have to go through therapy and or medication to regulate themselves back to a normal level of stress. Now, I have that, but I have a C in front of that. And that C could either stand for complex or childhood. So in my case, it's childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, when a person has PTSD, or in my case, CPTSD, their brain goes through a lot of trauma that causes it to freeze itself in a state of fight or flight. And as my doctor described it to me, that I was traumatized so much as a child that my amygdala stopped allowing serotonin get to my brain. And serotonin is your calming hormone. It's the one that makes you relax, it's the one that makes you content, and it's also the one that gives you the executive function over your brain. Now, because of my childhood trauma, my brain was flipped into a state of fight or flight, and it just stayed there. My baseline level of anxiety was always highly anxious. And what should be small stresses were major stresses, and my body would flush or sweat anytime something minor happened. And if something major happened, I felt completely out of control of my feelings. Now, I always thought that I was just bad at managing my feelings. I've been in therapy, I've been trying to work on myself, but I've always felt that I'm just no good at this life management stuff that everybody else is good at. It turns out that I never had the right chemicals to ease my stress. But the thing is, when it's CPTSD and not PTSD, you don't have a healthy baseline. A soldier that goes to war and experiences trauma comes home and knows that they feel different than they did before they went to war. A child that has PTSD doesn't know any better. I thought that this was normal. I had no idea that my brain was not functioning normally. I just thought that I was sensitive and had poor coping skills. But really, I just didn't have the chemicals to make my brain work properly. So, how did I find out? Well, 5 weeks ago, I went to the doctor to get my travel vaccines. And when I walked in, the doctor asked me to hop up on the scale just like normal, and he happened to notice that I had dropped a significant amount of weight in a short period of time. Because I was in at the doctor about 3 months ago for an annual visit, and he had my weight recorded then. And I had dropped 15 pounds since that last visit. And as someone who only stands 5 feet 4 inches tall, 15 pounds is quite a lot on someone my size. Now, I went into the doctor for travel vaccines. I wasn't prepared to talk about emotions and all these other problems. But when he brought it up, I just started crying because I was under so much stress. I'm the parent of a teenager. I was planning my wedding. I had family drama. I'm starting a new job. I had a whole lot of stresses on my plate, and that was affecting my appetite. I know how to eat healthy. I make healthy meals all the time. But during these high periods of stress, I was having a very, very hard time eating what was in front of me. And as such, my weight started to drop. So my doctor started to look through my file and ask me questions about my emotions, about my mood, about my temperament, and then about my childhood. Now, my GP didn't have this information already because I never gave it to him. I never thought that it was any of my doctor's business about that emotional stuff. I only wanted to see my doctor if something hurt, like if I sprained my ankle or I hurt my hand or I had a headache, something when there was pain that I knew that a doctor could fix. I never thought about going to my GP about emotional stuff. That's why I have a therapist. So I ended up telling my GP the things that I learned in therapy. So last year, my therapist did flag me as potentially having CPTSD, but she said, I'm a therapist, I can't diagnose you, but you can get diagnosed if you want to. However, I do have the skills to help work through your traumas with you so that you can feel better. Well, I didn't think that my traumas were that severe, so I decided to just take the therapy route and not seek any sort of medical attention. And you know what? The therapy was working. I was feeling better, but I had no idea how bad I was actually feeling in comparison to normal. So this was better than it was without therapy, but it still was nowhere near normal. So after I disclosed the bullying and traumas that I suffered as a child, my doctor told me that he suspects that my brain was not getting sufficient serotonin due to it being locked in a state of fight or flight. And he prescribed me an SSRI, which is a select serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And he told me that due to the trauma, my receptors had completely closed up. And that is an intelligent design because my body and brain thought that it was in a state of endangerment. So I had to be on high alert. It's a smart design because when you're in that state, you need to be able to react. You don't need to be calm. You don't need to eat. You need to be able to fight or flight. But the problem is, I wasn't in a state of endangerment. There was no bear chasing after me. I was just permanently locked in this state. So the SSRI drug that he prescribed to me, he told me it would open up my serotonin receptors, thus allowing serotonin into my brain. And that should calm me and make me more content and have more control over my emotions. He also told me that if my brain was healthy, the pill wouldn't do anything but give me side effects. So I might experience the bad parts of the pill, but I shouldn't feel any different because if the serotonin receptors are already open, well then the pill will do nothing. And you know what happened? 3 days in, I felt like a completely different person. I mean, I still have the same personality, but where did all the noise go? Where's that constant ringing? Where's the discomfort in my stomach? What happened to all the shaking? What happened to all the anger? All of this dissipated as soon as I started the medication. So then I called my doctor and I'm like, you made me high. This pill is making me high. You said it wasn't going to make me high. And I feel like I'm high without all the bad stuff. It's like I have the calming and my stomach doesn't hurt and I'm not angry, all of those things. And then he had to reassure me that no, this pill does not make you high. It's a restorative medication. It makes you normal. So now I'm discovering that I have never been normal. I mean, my level of stress was so high that I would need to be blackout drunk in order to feel as relaxed as normal people do. Because this is how I feel. I feel drunk but not drunk, meaning I have the same state of relaxation that I get when I drink without all the other bullshit that happens around it. That's how messed up I was. So why didn't I speak up sooner? I mean, I've had 44 years to figure out that there was something wrong with me. Well, I just didn't think it was that major. Even after my therapist last year told me that I had traumas, I still felt like, oh, they've affected me a little, but I've still been a very productive and successful adult. I can't see how my minor traumas could have really impacted me. I mean, I never witnessed any violence. I never experienced parents beating me up. I don't think that I was abused, but I was emotionally neglected. And that is abuse. It's very hard to come to terms with that because I grew up in a nuclear family, a nuclear middle class family. We had things. I had both parents together my entire childhood, yet I was emotionally neglected. My doctor told me that this type of brain trauma happens when a young child isn't sufficiently nurtured. Now, I've spoken a little bit in other videos about how much I was bullied as a child. There was a lot of racist bullying that I endured. From losing my name and being called Blackie, and the kids on the playground inventing the game Blackie or Lydia, and me getting so confused with my identity that I started writing Blackie on test papers because I thought that's who I was. And then there was the other racist bullying that happened at the next location that I moved to, where I was called the N-word and people telling me to go back to my own country the whole time. And even amongst my friends, there would be little snide remarks like, oh, you shouldn't wear ripped jeans because seeing brown skin isn't very nice kind of comments. So I always felt like an outsider due to my race. But that alone did not cause my brain trauma. Because as my therapist explained to me, children can escape trauma caused by bullying if they have a safe and nurturing home to go to. I did not. And that's not to say that my home was full of violence. It wasn't. It looked on the outside like a very normal home. But emotionally, it was empty. I believe that both of my parents were narcissists. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I cannot diagnose, so I will not be using narcissistic personality disorder to label them, but I am fully free to call them narcissists. My father was more of the grandiose type, the look at me, the my way or the highway, laying down the law type of authoritarian narcissist, whereas my mother was the vulnerable, covert, self-pitying type of narcissist. Both are damaging. Both prioritize their feelings over everyone else's feelings, and both are incapable of giving emotional support. I always felt like my opinions and my feelings weren't valid unless they aligned with my parents. My dad used to say 3 things about me. Lydia, you can't tell her anything. Lydia, she's always right. Or Lydia is way too sensitive. So those were the reactions I would get whenever my opinion differed from my dad's opinion. He could never see my point of view. If I tried to argue my point of view, it was, you always have to be right. But he never could admit that he was wrong. Or if I got emotional, he would tell me, you're too sensitive. And if I continued to be emotional, I would usually hear, well, you're reacting this way because you're wrong. Because if you were right, you wouldn't care. But that wasn't it. I was emotional because I was frustrated because I wasn't getting heard. My mother, on the other hand, handled things differently, but not better. She would frequently talk over me, citing her own life examples and minimizing mine. So if I mentioned that I was experiencing racism, she would go on a tangent and talk all about the racism that she's experienced. And she knows better because she lived in Africa and she has experienced all of it. And when I would hear this, I'd be like, well, I guess my problems aren't that bad, so I should shut up. And of course, if I cry, my father is going to start telling me I'm too sensitive. So maybe I shouldn't even talk about what's going on at school. My mother also had the fall to the ground puddle sort of reaction to things. So if something very sad happened, instead of consoling me, she would fall to the ground and start crying and be sorry for her. She could never give me the support I needed. And God forbid I did something that disappointed her, because she could never resist doling out the shame. It's bad enough already that I feel guilty and I feel bad for me, but to have the layers of shame that your mother throws on top of you is absolutely destroying. So, because I could identify these patterns with my parents, I stopped telling them things. I would just eat my feelings. I would go to school, I would get bullied, I would come home very quietly, then I'd go to my room and I'd bawl my eyes out, cry myself to sleep, all the while hitting myself in the head about get stronger, get tougher, stop being so sensitive, this will make you tough, this will make you strong. But really, I was just killing my brain. I was flipping that switch all the way on to fight or flight, and it got stuck. So now that I know that I have this brain trauma, what now? Well, my doctor speaks in analogies, just like me. And he told me that recovering from trauma is like driving a car. The medication is the brakes, and the steering is therapy. I was trying to heal from the trauma with steering only. And if I'm honest, the amount of improvement I was getting with the therapy made me be a little bit stagnant with it. I mean, I was still doing it. I just wasn't doing it as regularly or with as much effort as I probably should have. But now with the medication, and I can see how big of a gap I had between how I was functioning and what is normal, I am all in on healing this trauma. So the medication has allowed me to tap the brakes, but if I want to get completely better, I'm going all in on trauma therapy so I can learn how to steer. These past few months have been a lot for me. I had a lot of stresses going on. I was struggling with my appetite. I was losing a lot of weight. I was getting married. And to round it out, I discovered that I've been dealing with 44 years of brain trauma. And I don't wish that on anyone. Because now that I know what's normal, nobody should have to live in the state that I was living in. Absolutely nobody. It is hell. So I would like to keep this conversation going because I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one that has a relatively serious condition that went undiagnosed and untreated for so long. Because how on earth does a child get post-traumatic stress disorder when they grow up in a nuclear family where both parents are present and nobody beats them and nobody hits them? Like, how can that be abuse? But emotional neglect is abuse. It is abuse. It does affect your brain. So, in addition to the fat acceptance commentary videos that I will be releasing, I will also be releasing videos about CPTSD and narcissistic abuse because I see this as a way to vent, to heal, and to help. So until next time, stay body positive, but also body honest.